Southeast Asia is on the cusp of a new age of development as governments in the region open up their economies and adopt new growth strategies. Formed in 1967, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has seen growth flourish. Intra-ASEAN trade now stands at about $600 billion, with GDP at approximately $2.6 trillion. From just 5 founding members, namely Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines, the group now comprises 10 countries. Their journey towards integration took a momentous step at the end of last year when the ASEAN community was inaugurated, forming as well the ASEAN Economic Community, which aims to strengthen ties and boost trade. With the promise of easier access to a single economic bloc of 630 million people, the initiative provides the region with an open and integrated market that offers more product choices at competitive prices.
Frankly, people have been questioning how much real progress we're seeing. And it's clear that 10 diverse countries will always have a problem becoming really together. But the positive sign is that a number of the economies are starting to really reform at the national level. Don't forget, ASEAN is still outperforming the world, so there is an interest in our region.
Despite being dubbed as the next global growth engine, external headwinds such as continued moderation in the Chinese economy and uncertainties over the new relationship between the UK and the EU after Brexit have held back growth.
I think the question mark is whether in that global climate, Southeast Asia makes sense, and it does. China's slowing has an impact on us directly, and on the commodity trade, which affects so many of our countries' neighbors like Indonesia, it also has a ripple effect. But by and large, I think that ASEAN plus China and India remain relatively bright spots on the global stage. There's a lot of money in this world looking for strong returns and stable governments. And I think this region could be in a sweet spot.
Beyond the slowdown in global growth and trade, rising anti-globalization sentiment in many parts of the world could risk harming ASEAN's pursuit of economic integration.
Traditionally open economies like the UK and the US are now facing significant challenges in the forms of Brexit, managing its consequences, and a particularly divisive presidential election campaign in the United States. Some of these headwinds arise from the genuine concerns of citizens who feel they have not benefited, but in fact may have even been harmed by an open economy. And indeed, it is incumbent upon every government to implement policies and execute them diligently to enable its citizens to participate in and benefit from economic integration, directly or indirectly. However, we must not allow such anti-trade perspectives seizing the policy agenda, because that would be detrimental to the long-term interests of our countries and our people.
As ASEAN economies attempt to move up the value chain, domestic reforms are becoming increasingly critical. In July, Indonesian President Joko Widodo reshuffled his cabinet for the second time in less than a year as the government looked to shift its growth policies from a consumption-led model to an investment-driven one.
Since President Jokowi came into power in 2014, the idea is to transform the economy, because at that time, 2014, we already realized the declining trend of the commodity price. And we are starting to do the reform by diversifying our economy and, more importantly, revitalizing our manufacturing sector and accelerating the infrastructure project, plus promoting some services.
Last year, the Jokowi administration rolled out 12 economic packages aimed at stimulating growth and attracting fresh investment into the country. This was followed by the loosening of restrictions on foreign investment in almost 50 sectors early this year, the country's biggest opening to international investment in a decade.
The idea to attract foreign investor is no longer foreign investor in mining, in plantation, but foreign investor is manufacturing. If we are trying to attract foreign investor in manufacturing, they will ask a lot of things. They will require a lot of things. Infrastructure is one of them, but the other is the simple procedure. So this is the way we are trying to revitalize our manufacturing by making investment much easier for any investor.
There are two bold reforms that Indonesia did for the last 2 years. First one, development of infrastructure. And the second one, I think this is really good news for all investors here, is more openness to foreign investors.
There are three keywords for the ASEAN region. One is growth, of course. The second one is diversity, and the third one is volatility. The growth comes with the urbanization and also the expansion of the middle income class. So we identify three key areas where we would like to focus on. The first one is the development of the infrastructure. Second is consumer products and services. And the third one is how we cope with the changing energy flow in the region.
ASEAN has a lot more to offer. A couple of noteworthy trends. Collectively, if ASEAN were a country, today we would have more than 50% of our 600 million population below 30 years old. This is a very sustainable workforce for many years to come for companies. By 2030, it is estimated that more than 65% of ASEAN's population will be in the middle income class, presenting a huge consumption market for companies to tap.
We are already the world's fastest growing region in terms of internet adoption, with 3.8 million new users coming online every month. If ASEAN governments support digital connectivity and ASEAN businesses keep pace with the shift towards digitization, the payoffs will be significant.
Coming up, with Election Day just weeks away stateside, what does a change in leadership mean for U.S.-ASEAN ties and the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Robots fire up our imagination with their smarts and speed. But when disaster strikes...
When robots were needed the most, how come they weren't effective?
Now, the race is on to build rescue robots with human-like mobility, dexterity, and even autonomy.
There were a lot of these real-world instances that we did not experience in the lab.
Rise of the Robots, Sunday at 8 p.m. on Channel News Asia.
Why fight when you can feast? Me Club's new dining privileges program, Feast, for delicious one-for-one dining offers island-wide. Download Me Club for Feast and other rewards.
Is Timor-Leste running out of time to diversify and find new networks of growth?
We've learned a great deal of the experience of other countries on this research course. And that's why we set up the fund.
Oil and gas is not necessarily a curse, provided we spend it wisely.
It should be considered as blessing.
Between the Lines, Wednesday at 6 and 11 p.m. on Channel News Asia.
In celebration of 50 years of diplomatic ties between Singapore and the U.S., the White House rolled out the red carpet for Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Lee's August trip was the first official state visit by a Singaporean Prime Minister in over 3 decades. Discussions on future bilateral relations aside, President Barack Obama and Prime Minister Lee addressed pressing issues such as tensions in the South China Sea and the ratification of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement.
A guy who wants to raise tariffs rather than lower tariffs would not be very supportive of TPP, I don't think. He also seems to indicate that he wants to renegotiate NAFTA, he wants to renegotiate the WTO, and he has already said that TPP is just a non-starter as far as he's concerned. So for all those reasons, I think it would be very difficult to go forward with TPP under a new Republican administration.
Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has praised the agreement while serving in the Obama administration, but now runs a campaign opposing it, although she is still seen as a supporter of ASEAN.
Technology and innovation.
I have actually worked with the Democratic candidate when I was ambassador in Vietnam, and she visited Asia more than any other Secretary of State that I've ever seen. She is an ardent proponent of the rebalancing, and TPP is the economic side of the rebalancing that's been going on between the United States and Asia.
The multinational trade deal, which covers 40% of the world economy, was officially signed in February and will undergo a 2-year ratification period before being implemented. At the recent ASEAN summit in Laos, President Barack Obama said that the failure to move ahead with a trade deal would call into question America's leadership.
I think it's worth noting that the significance of the TPP can't really be overstated. The combined GDP of all the 12 member countries has an estimated combined GDP of $27.4 trillion and comprises 40% of global GDP and a third of world trade. The TPP is being held up as a gold standard FTA, addressing a number of issues across borders, at the border and behind the border as well. But at the same time, we of course hear certain rhetoric from various parties, some of the signatory countries as well. There's an expectation that ratification probably a little bit more difficult than many of us would hope for as well.
We have seen an increasing trend toward protectionism or anti-globalization sentiments all over the world, and even in the election campaign in the big country. If these political trends synchronize with the actual trend of slow trade, the world could fall into a vicious circle or trap of shrinking equilibrium.
Among 12 countries, 12 member countries, Vietnam is less developed than other member countries, even in comparison with Peru. But Vietnam decided to join the TPP, and it didn't take long time to decide to join it. And I would like to inform that in October, I think that we are going to ratify TPP. But why did Vietnam join the TPP? Because when we look past, when we integrate our country into regional and international economy, we have got benefit more than we losses.
Thailand is a major exporter of textiles. It now have problems competing with Vietnam, exporting clothes to the United States because we're not TPP member countries. So Vietnam is receiving a lot of investment from China as a result of the fact that China is not part of the TPP. Maybe it's good for you. Another problem for Thailand is also, as you know, we are a major exporter of automobile parts and assembly unit for Japanese cars. So Japan is very worried now that Thailand is not part of the TPP.
Goshi-san, would you like to consider this idea if there's a failure to ratify TPP? Would that open up playing field for more trade deals with China? What would that mean?
We think, as Mr. Maharak put, it's our responsibility for original 12 countries to put TPP in force first. Once we successfully make TPP open to the countries, there will be a lot of possibility for other countries, including China, to join this open, transparent trade system.
Whether the debate over TPP and the problems that are being encountered on the RCEP negotiations, do you consider those signals as well that mega plurilateral trade deals are becoming too difficult and that bilateral deals are actually better?
How TPP is going to affect ASEAN? Actually, I see it more in a positive light because we now have 4 ASEAN members that are members of the TPP, which means these 4 will have harmonization in many things, including rules and regulation. Expanding these 4 countries to include another 6 countries will be easier than individual countries trying to design our own harmonization.
If the US fails to ratify TPP, could the other 11 nations seek to renegotiate a new deal along the same or similar lines?
That may be a common view because some countries are going to get most of their benefits by the United States being in TPP. But you've still got Australia, you've still got Japan, you've still got a lot of very strong importing countries within TPP. And as I say, I think that some of the progress that's been made on digital economy, on services, on IPR is just too important to pass up. So I think there will definitely be, if U.S. does not ratify, there will definitely be a move to salvage something out of the TPP. There's been too much work and blood, sweat, and tears put into it not to do that.
Up next, could tensions in the South China Sea derail Beijing's plans to expand its economic footprint beyond its shores?
In the next episode, we enter the world of real estate, LuxAsia style. Whether it's road testing your own private island getaway, or checking out your multi-million-dollar Hong Kong residence, or letting you into one of Asia's best-kept property secrets. When it comes to the best and top-of-the-range real estate, this is the show in the know. Next on LuxAsia. Catch LuxAsia, Saturday, 8:30 p.m., exclusively on Channel News Asia.
This is brought to you by the definitive luxury whiskey, the Dalmore.
Travel between North America and Asia has just gotten a whole lot easier. Connect through Taipei for the fastest routes between major cities on both sides of the Pacific. EVA Air, a Star Alliance member.
Coming up on the next Asia Business First, part of the club. The Chinese yuan joins the IMF's exclusive currency club. We're going to weigh the implications with Sheila Patel of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. We're also going to talk about what impact the impending U.S. elections could have right here in Asia.
It's time to spin and win.
It's the best of both worlds.
Win cash
or travel around the world.
It's never been easier to get what you want. Tune in to Capacity 5 from now till 28th October. You get the best of both worlds. Only with Class 95.
Spin and win.
This Saturday, heading into the last quarter, global growth is weak. Interest rates could rise, and the US presidential race hangs in the balance.
That was a disaster.
If you invest in stocks, currencies, or commodities, should you sit on the sidelines or take some chances?
US equities is still the place to be in.
Prepare for more volatility.
We see oil prices recovering.
Money Mind, Saturday, 10:30 p.m.
Money Mind is brought to you by Subaru.
The launch of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2015 is a major milestone that creates opportunities in a $2.6 trillion market with over 600 million people. In 2014, ASEAN collectively was the 3rd largest economy in Asia and the 7th largest in the world. China is ASEAN's top trading partner, followed by Japan and the US, but tensions over Beijing's claim to the South China Sea have strained ties. The situation worsened after an arbitration court in The Hague ruled in July that China had no historical title over the disputed territory and that it had breached the Philippines' sovereign rights. The Chinese government has dismissed the ruling, calling it illegal and invalid. China claims almost the entire South China Sea, through which about $5 trillion worth of seaborne trade passes every year. Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam also have claims to parts of the sea believed to be rich in oil and gas. However, controversies in the South China Sea need not cast a shadow over the region.
In these last few years, really you've seen an upping of tensions, and I think they need to be managed. And one of the ways to see it is that ASEAN must remain united. We cannot be on the far side of either being against China or being in China's pocket. ASEAN has got to be united and a partner, not a puppet of China. There are many reasons to want this. China can gain and push ahead with its One Belt, One Road or OBOR strategy. But additionally, this cannot be rammed down ASEAN's throat. ASEAN has got to really come up to the game and help develop its own infrastructure and to really match Chinese interests with theirs.
Because of the South China Sea issue, everyone is concerned how it would affect countries, the claimant's country as well as Singapore that is caught in between. I suppose this is something that has to be factored in. Really, at the end of it, you cannot run away from the fact that many of the businesses involving China, you can't away from this political influence. But the truth is that many of this is actually transient. In other words, maybe after a couple of months, when the dust settled down, actually all back to business as usual.
We've seen across the globe over the years concerns about national security and ownership of natural monopolies, ownership of industries that touch large numbers of consumers vis-a-vis foreign ownership, right? A country's ability to manage, let's say, politically motivated interests and approaches to investment come down to their own procurement rules and regulations, their own rule of law, and their ability to manage transparency in the selection of bidders and in the rules of the road for investing.
You see, the risk in Chinese means risk and opportunities, returns. They are always the balance. But I also want to highlight the point that the reason China initiated this One Belt, One Road, is really for peace and economic prospects. If you have war, all the infrastructure would be finished with one bomb. Right. So in that sense, the risk to China is probably much bigger than the risks in the partner countries, when you build the infrastructure.
Most countries that enter China will have to collaborate with Chinese companies and local government. But as China take the stage outside China, and they will have to really consider partnering with others. In Southeast Asia, for example, it's difficult to say that I come to Southeast Asia, I want to be my own. So I think the environment in ASEAN would favor China to take a more open stance of collaborating with other countries.
Stimulating the Chinese purchasing power, which is already, everywhere we have seen, but still the potential is huge, but the consumption still are not very strong in the component of GDP. So that's the two areas, and the implication of these reforms is going to mean cheaper products and also high quality products. But on the demand side, it also means there will be larger and more sustainable demand from Chinese consumers for products produced around the world, including those from Asia. And not just products, but also service. The Chinese tourist is one example. So what it means is that there will be a lot of opportunities for Chinese companies working together with companies in this region to satisfy, those demand.
China has started from very much still inward-looking, trying to attract investment, to one that is outward-looking. And in the initial years, actually, we talk about China's influence outside China very much in the sense of resource acquisition, like in Africa. But to now, what we're looking at is China actually going out in a big way, looking at infrastructure participation in infrastructure development, such as high-speed rail development. In the case of ASEAN, there are many opportunities. Chinese companies have expressed interest to come to ASEAN because they see it as a big market. And partly it's also to balance the lack of growth opportunity in China because of domestic issue and so on. So they do value opportunity overseas.
Whether it's China or whether it's the World Bank or whether it's the US or anybody else, when you're receiving unsolicited bids or when you're opening up your basic services to outside investment, get your own house in order first and understand whether this is a priority for your constituents, whether it's affordable for them and for you fiscally before you swing open the doors.
The SWIA is Singapore's oldest think tank and one that really tries to take the politics and economics and ask, what does it matter to business? And we're very pleased to have the ASEAN and Asia Forum here in Singapore to take these lessons we've learned from other governments abroad and bring them home here to the community in Singapore which invests abroad, whether it's Singaporean or Singapore-based. ASEAN's diversity of 10 countries is really economic diversity as well. Now this diversity sometimes is a problem politically, but economically we have a chance to create a real value chain. We're not at all anymore competing head-to-head. Rather, long-term win-win cooperation is really a reality coming in ASEAN.
This program was brought to you by the Singapore Institute of International Affairs and proudly supported by the following partners.
Singapore is adopting a new bus contracting model, so I'm heading to London to discover why it's been such a roaring success.
Nowadays you've got to be a nuclear physicist to drive a bus.
Yeah.
No, it's back the other way. Go on, see it back. Oh dear.
And I'll explore one of the most complex surveillance systems in the world. A 1-hour special for the season debut of It Figures, Riding London's Buses, Monday at 8 p.m. on Channel News Asia.
They are the famous KBG 84 Grandma singers from Okinawa. Each of these ladies is an octogenarian and lives a beautiful life. Channel News Asia will be inviting them to sing at a special concert at Singapore Botanic Gardens. We're looking for Singaporeans who can speak Japanese to buddy up with them. If you speak Japanese, please send us a video of yourself speaking in Japanese and English to happenings@channelnewsasia.com. Tell us why you would like to buddy up with our Japanese octogenarian guests from Okinawa.
I'm Anthony Morse, and I'm on a journey along China's maritime Silk Road. The Silk Road will connect 65 countries and transform the flow of global trade. But resistance is mounting in Asia and beyond. How will China convince the world that it is a force for good? The Maritime Silk Road premieres October 18th